rough idea of the amount of material utilized to create that piece. And all the pieces lining the front of the stage were also made with 2 gathers of glass. So you can see the wide variety of shapes and styles we'll be able to achieve with this amount of material. Now, cold is a relative term to us glassblowers. Around 1,000 degrees is when this material will become stiff and rigid and stop moving and be able to support the weight of this next gather of glass. A little bit below that temperature range is actually when our glass can break it. But Alex dips beneath the molten surface, turns in one even direction, and will wind on 2 to 3 times the amount of material that they enter that chamber with. And that rotating motion that they do to collect the glass won't stop throughout the entire process. If you look at Alex's left hand, at any given moment in time, it will never stop turning. They've been blowing glass for 8 years now, so it's almost like breathing at this point. They really don't have to think about that constant rotating motion, but it is not easy your first couple of years. And they're organizing this material with a couple different wood-based waterlogged tools. The first of which is this cherry wood scoop tool. It is made out of a block of cherry wood because it has a tight grain pattern and low resin content, so it does not leave any residue behind on our glass. And this is a pad of the local newspaper. It's about 6 to 10 sheets thick, folded up into thirds a couple of times, saturated in water as well. So that cherry wood block spends its entire life in a bucket of water, and this newspaper pad spends its short life in a saturated state all the time to create that layer of steam to form the glass. You can see Alex will constantly wet that down to continue that process. Now that newspaper pad will only last us about a week or 2 properly taken care of. Those blocks will last about 2 to 3 years properly taken care of as well, so it really just depends. But the glass is constantly dropping in temperature. When it's outside of these furnace-like environments, so to be able to work with it, we have to continually heat it. This secondary reheating chamber is also kept at 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. But the only purpose of this chamber is to make sure our material stays fluid and moving. So it's an empty barrel of heat, essentially. And Alex will be making frequent trips to and from that reheating chamber to make sure that they can continue to work with this molten material. Now they are inflating the glass with their toes right now. Tapping on that foot pedal alerts an air compressor. They've attached a hose to the end of this giant metal straw. This is our auto inflator system. For 2,000 years, we used our own breath to inflate the glass, but about 2 years ago, we needed to come back to the museum, be able to blow glass for you all, and keep our masks on at the same time. So the auto inflator system was brought here, and we did not like it at first. It was a very big change, not everyone's favorite. But 2 years later, here we are, and we still utilize this tool as we realized it's a very helpful shaping device to have on hand. Alex is able to do all the shaping and inflation at the same time, rather than having me go over there and blow through the end of that iron while they are doing their shaping moves. So it really does help speed along the process. It's more up to the personal choice of the gaffer now, and less a requirement. So you can see that Alex used a hybrid system of their own breath for that starter bubble, but then switching to the auto inflator system to help with the shaping maneuvers necessary. Now they've cut in a constriction between the blown form and the blow pipe by using this tool here. We call this a pair of jacks. Now that's an intentional structural weak point in the material that we call a jack line, named after these tools right here. Now those jacks are kind of like an extension of the glassblower's hand, and we'll use them in a multitude of ways throughout the entire making process, but that is their most important job. That constriction goes into every piece of glass we make in this environment. Whether it's a bowl, a plate, a pitcher, or a glass fish, they all need that constriction put in early on. If you've ever dropped a cup on your kitchen floor, you know glass doesn't like to break in nice, even, uniform patterning of the lines. So we do need to set up a weak point where we know it's going to fail at. It's kind of like the lines on a chocolate bar that tell your chocolate where to break. Same idea with the glass here. Alex has done a great deal of inflation. They're going for a nice large bowl for you guys today here. And soon we're going to do a little bit of additive work. Glass blowing is a bit of a team sport. You never get much done alone. So you will always see us working in teams of at least 2 or 3 or 4 as the piece gets larger and larger. You might need more help along the way. Huh? Okay. Now, Alex is what we call the gaffer, though. I'm here to help them out along the way because this is a team sport. You can't get anything done by yourself. But Alex is the gaffer. And that used to have a lot more importance in the factory and apprenticeship program system. But as machine-made glass has taken over and the factory system has really died out, that term has kind of shifted or altered. The term gaffer derives from the word grandfather, meaning the most senior member on the team. Our most senior gaffer has 33 years of glass blowing experience, but we are all gaffers. Alex is the gaffer for this show, I was the gaffer for the last. In modern times, it just refers to whoever is creating the piece. And it's kind of shifted and altered in that manner. When you were working within the bounds of the factory and apprenticeship program system, there would be a lot of different names for the different ranks as you developed your glass blowing skill and moved up through that factory system. Now, 99 to 98% of all the glass you interact with in modern times is all made by a machine. Alex and I are happy for that, though. It means we don't have to spend our lives making light bulbs. So it really works in our effect. We can spend more time making fun objects like these instead. Now, Alex gives me a little secret glass blower head nod, which means it's time for me to step in and do my job of collecting a little bit of glass for them to use a technique called casting on and casting off to add and subtract material. So I collect a lot of glass from this furnace and I'll bring it over to them. They're just going to use the heat and weight of the glass to add and subtract that material. So winding it on when they have collected enough glass, casting it away. You can see the second I stop rotating, the glass wants to hit the floor. A lot of times we get asked, what do you make your first day in the glass studio? And traditionally it's a mess. Something like this. You don't have that constant rotation ability developed yet. So maybe you're a little bit more impressed with Alex and their constant rotation of that iron to make sure everything maintains a nice and on-center point. Honey? All right. But they're happy with the shape that they've created and we need to flip this piece around now. That's where I come in handy once again. I'm going to make what's called a punty. It's going to be our temporary handle for the rest of the process. It's just a little gather of glass on the end of a solid iron that I'm going to shape and cool into a Q-tip-like shape. We don't want this to permanently bond to the bottom of our form like that foot that we just added. We just want it to be a temporary handle to hold out throughout the rest of the process. So it has to be hot enough to stick on and cold enough to break free at the end. That constriction Alex made also needs to be around 1,000 degrees right now to be able to properly break away from this iron. So temperature control and timing is not an easy thing to get a hang of as a beginning glass blower. This is the broom and the dustpan step for most glass blowers. It normally does not go according to plan. They stick it right on center there. We turn in tandem just to make sure both irons are running true. And soon, once all the temperatures have equalized, they'll induce thermal shock. That jack line with a cold tool and a light knock to the iron, and this should break free right at that weak point. Can we get a round of applause for Alex? That was very smooth. Yeah, your first couple of years, that does not go as smoothly. More oftentimes than not, that punty goes on too cold, and our piece falls into that conveniently located bucket at the base of the bench. Or our constriction is too far beneath 1,000 degrees, we re-enter 2,000 degrees of fire and cracks form along our piece. So learning this temperature control and timing that we only develop through breaking a lot of glass, along with Alex's constant rotation, are a couple reasons why we say that it takes about 3 to 5 years to be considered a proficient beginner in glass. Nothing else in life really prepares you for all the skills that you need to utilize to work with this challenging material. This is going to be a pretty long heat though, a really great point in time. If anyone has any questions or curiosities, I may be able to answer for you. Oh, just stunned silence. Alex tends to have that quick. Yeah.
I saw on the previous demonstration when they added the colored glass strips to it. I thought it was after the first gather.
It does.
So how does that blend in with the second gather?
Yeah, so when we add the colorized glass to that first gather, it just essentially melts in. But if you did take a cross section of any of the pieces here along the stage, that's what it sounds like. like one of my cacti. But essentially, if you took a cross section of any of these pieces of glass, you would see a layer of clear, a thin veil of color, and then another thin layer of clear. So a little does go a long way with our colorized glass. It's very, very dense. And I didn't talk about color application, and it might be something that you guys are curious about. At the start of the process, fresh from the furnace, we would roll through these tiny little crushed up bits of colorized glass. We call this frit. These tiny little crushed up bits stick all over the surface, creating a thin veil of color. Just like sprinkles being applied to an ice cream cone, same idea of color application. These colors are made by adding in different metals to the same composition of glass as we're melting in our furnace. So when we add in cadmium or selenium, we get the oranges and the yellows and the reds. When we add in iron, we get green. Cobalt makes it dark blue. Purple is made with manganese, and pink is made with gold. So a lot of the metals that you see on the periodic table change the color of our glass. But we want to add them secondary, because that furnace runs 24/7. This particular one has been on for about 3 years now. The one in our amphitheater has been on for almost 8 years now. And that's a very long time to be having to make all pink or all green glass. So we add our color secondary for that reason. But Alex just asked me to get them a little bit of glass to create a wrap around this form. This will show you how hot glass can stretch for a very long period of time and thinner than a strand of hair. So I bring this on over to Alex. They take the iron from me and place it onto their form. And they do what we call a wacky wrap. Now, as long as their form was hot enough and that bit that I brought over was hot enough as well, that should stick together. Kind of hot glass doesn't like to stick to kind of hot glass, so both need to be toasty enough for that effect to occur. Any other curiosities I can answer for you? Yep.
So if you get like the mottled color, is that like a larger chunk of frit, or is it like with this? The yellow?
All these are made with frit.
So is it like a bigger? So is the frit like this one that the yellow has like blobs? No, sorry, the like lighter yellow. It's got,
Yeah,
like,
so that has less to do with maybe the color, because they're all the same grit of frit, almost
Okay.
like a chunky Himalayan salt.
Oh,
It's just more how many times you roll through it. So this one, I was here when Jamie made this. She only rolled through the frit once. In comparison to this nice, more uniform, this might be 2 or 3 rolls through the frit. So it just depends how many times you roll through it, as they are those little chunks. It's not going to kind of blend throughout it. If we do want a more seamless colorant look, we would use a different type of glass color addition technique altogether. We would use something like this. This is called color bar. And this takes a little bit more preparation. That's why we don't as commonly do it in these demonstrations. We would heat this little box full of all of our color bars up to 1,000 degrees, and then pick them up and add them onto our form. And it would create a very uniform veil of color. But it's very dense as well. This is actually the same color of transparent green as this is. So a little does go a long way. This chunk would be used to colorize that entire piece of glass. Alex, are you going to spin it out? Any other curiosities? Yeah.
How do you get the hole in it?
Huh?
How do you get the hole?
The hole in it. Yeah, that was from the process of the transfer from one penny to the other. So there was actually a hole in this iron. This is essentially a giant metal straw. So the hole was a small opening created by the use of this giant metal straw here. When we flip it from one iron onto the other iron that it's currently on, we get access to that opening. Now Alex is going to do something very interesting right here. They're going to do their final shaping moves just with heat, centripetal force, and gravity. So you're going to want to keep your eyes on them. They're going to turn very, very slow right now, doing a more focused heat on the front half of their form. Once enough heat has developed in there, they'll start to turn faster and faster, winging the glass away from center. And depending upon how they hold it will depict the final form here. They'll be able to feel the glass no longer able to support its own weight. And at that point in time, they'll spin faster and faster, but you'll see a wobble as well develop in that lid. They open up a couple more doors too to give themselves enough room to come out of that reheating chamber. Maybe if you guys are in the front row or so, you might be able to feel that amount of heat. They spin faster and faster. For a second, we have a pasta plate. Downwards to the ground, and cloth-like ruffles develop. But just as quickly as they spun that out, this has solidified into its final form. And we can't leave this out in front of you. As glass cools down, it's contracting. And those wraps and that foot are all contracting at different rates. So this would be broken in a matter of minutes. To be able to save this beautiful bowl, there you have it, that's Alex. Yep, your turn. All right, so that is full of all of our beautiful demonstration pieces from throughout the day. Since this is our last demonstration, we will send it on its slow cooling cycle. Piece that size, it's going to take about 8 hours to reach room temperature. That's a pretty short cycle. If you go out here into our innovations area, you can see the largest piece of glass in the museum's collection. It's a 200-inch, 20-ton telescope lens. That piece of glass is so large that the successful run of it took 11 months to reach room temperature. So that slow cooling process really does take a while, all dependent upon the thickness of the material. One more round of applause for Alex Young. Good, and down here. Any other curiosities I might be able to answer for anyone?